Okay, we are back in session. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Clark is joining in attendance. And now we're moving on to motion to approve the agenda. Do I have someone to make a motion? Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 6, 2023? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Abrams. Any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up are reports to the Planning Commission. First, we will start with City Council. Councilmember Dish, do you have anything to report?
I am very pleased to report that the 721 South Forest PUD passed unanimously on second reading. I'm also pleased to report that the amendment to the conditional zoning for Beekman on Broadway went just fine on first reading, which you would expect. And then also an interesting thing that we did through the consent agenda was to remove racial restrictions from the deed for Almendinger Park. And I mean, there were some other great things on that agenda, but nothing of specific interest to the land use domain.
Thank you for that. Mix Kelly, do you have anything to report?
Yes, without objection, staff recommend canceling the July 5th meeting. This is due to the proximity to the July 4th holiday, as well as there are no petitions ready to act on, and we would recommend to consolidate administrative items, such as your organizational meeting, to the following regular session. And that is at the discretion of the chair.
We don't need to move a motion for this that I can just call?
Just without objection, we'll proceed to cancel.
Any objection? No, we proceed to cancel. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondly, the Ordinance Revisions Committee at your next Ordinance Revisions Committee, we will be focusing on an update request by the city's transportation team to the UDC. So please look for that. And if you are not on the ORC but are curious in the discussion, please tune in. And then there was a question at a recent Planning Commission meeting about the possibility of alternate member appointments. There was a late add to your packet, and there's also a printout in front of you with a memorandum from Planning Manager Leonard. In short, there is not a basis in city law to allow alternates. It is specifically allowed for in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, but for some reason it does not have a companion or equivalent provision in the Planning Act. So the proposal by the planning manager is that if the primary basis for the request related to absences and recusals, there could be you could set in motion a request to update city code. This is not a UDC amendment. This would actually require a modification of Title I, Chapter 8 of City Code to do something, for example, such as indicate a different standard than 6 members, like a majority of members present, or some other to be determined measure.
Thank you. Okay. Do any other Planning Commission officers or committee liaisons have anything to report? No? Okay. We'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes on an issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We will first call individuals present to address the commission and then remote participants. To speak during the public hearing remotely, press *9. If listening by phone, use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247. and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of the comments. During our technical difficulties delay, my understanding is that anybody calling in remotely may have difficulty hearing other remote comments. We ensure that within the room we can hear all of those digital comments, but I just want to let anybody listening in that there may be technical difficulties and you may have a hard time hearing other public comments. So starting with that, is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
Caller ending in 534, you have permission to address the commission.
Good evening, this is Don Stallworth calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. I'd like to chat just off the cuff about city council decisions from last night. We've got a PED at 721 South 4th that was approved, and then it has some affordable housing included in that, that has some sustainability measures included in that as a PED. Couple of thoughts on that. We've extended further south where we're allowing certain height development by this vote. Zoning is discretionary. Each project is evaluated on its own, but it does create, in at least layperson's terms, a precedent. The proper process for this, I'm not necessarily for or against that height at that location, to move a little bit further south than what's currently called for. Maybe that is a good thing. But there's a proper process when we have that discussion. And all those people that were there last night, the council public comment, be they for or against, and you and me, we'd all be part of this process. And that's the comprehensive plan division. So right as we're about to enter the comprehensive plan revision process, that's where we have the community conversation about, do we feel that moving that line of that height of building was appropriate or not? And we're skipping that process. Now, I know people say, we've got crisis, we've got affordable housing crisis, we've got a sustainability crisis. And yes, I recognize all that, but essentially we're declaring the equivalent of martial law, and those crises aren't going away anytime soon, not in a year or two or several years. So how long do we operate under the idea that we do whatever we want outside of the proper process because we're operating in a crisis? And then zoning is discretionary, but you can't be arbitrary. So when you do one thing for one developer that really is, again, not in legal appellate court terms, but in essence, a precedent in layperson's terms. And so looking at the other item, which was the removal of zoning conditions for the third phase of the Beekman Lower Town project, we have some discretion there. We remove those. We can ask that building to be built sustainably. We're asking other developers to do it, but we're not asking them to do it. And I know some people ask, and the developer was pretty arrogantly adamant that they weren't even going to follow the electric stoves to the market standard. So we're being a bit arbitrary when we ask it of one and not another. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers?
There are no other callers at this time, and I neglected to hit record, so there will be a small noise.
Recording in progress.
Okay. And with that, we're going to move to public hearings for next business meeting, which I believe we just canceled.
That's correct. There are no public hearings scheduled.
Great, thank you. And so now we'll move on to unfinished business. And at this time, I will be recusing myself and handing off the chair to Commissioner Abrams.
Okay, so to introduce the petition, we are, this is a continued public hearing for 1601 South State Street. This is the Southtown rezoning, site plan, and street vacation, a project with 3 petitions to redevelop the block bounded by South State Street, White Street, Henry Street, and Stimson Street. There are 3 parts to this petition. 1, to rezone a block of 10 parcels from R4C to C1A/R zoning with conditions. 2, another site plan for city council approval to construct a 220,000 square foot mixed use building. And 3, a petition to vacate the public alley in the block. The staff recommendation is approval. So we'll begin with a presentation from the petitioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Abrams. I'm Adam Smith. I'm the Director of Design for Synecdoche here in Ann Arbor. I have with us our studio director, Sydney Philippus, and also the owners of the project, Marge and Heidi Posher, are here as well. Our civil engineer can't make it tonight because his wife is currently having a baby. So hi, Brandon, over at the hospital. Hopefully everything's going well. Watching, if you're watching, I don't know if you are. I hope you're not watching. Okay, so since the last time we presented, we made some changes to the conditions, and the 3 things that we're doing: the rezoning to C1AR, the alley vacation, and the site plan. So the changed conditions, we removed the open space condition and replaced it with making it primarily residential with a max of 30% short-term rentals. And then we also added no gas connection except for emergency backup. So there'd be no gas connection to the site with the rezoning. And we've proposed that there's no gas connection at all. We're using a different type of fuel for emergency generators. We've also resolved all the outstanding staff comments and had the ZBA variance approved in that time as well. So I'll do a quick refresher of what the project is. Still in the same spot. First off, it's located at the center of 4 unique quadrants of Ann Arbor, where you have the South State industrial commercial with food and entertainment, the athletic campus, residential neighborhoods, and the campus district. Looking to the north, the context there is it's near the campus business district, only a 5-minute bike ride and 20-minute walk up South State Street, along with multiple other facilities of the campus. And then to the south, we have the South State Street area plan and the land use, the Area 5 of the 2009 land use plan located in these 2 highlighted areas, which call for having mixed use along this corridor and encouraging multimodal transportation, encouraging residential and commercial usage along the Stimson Street and South Industrial Commercial area. That's from the 2009 land use. And then also the State Street corridor plan promote mixed use land uses, residential and office along the corridor. TC1 located just down South State Street around Briarwood Mall. So looking at the rezoning, what we've chosen to use the C1AR because it's so compatible with the surrounding parcels that include several zoning districts from high density residential to mixed use. To the east is R4C, the north is a PUD of multiple family affordable residential, R4C around that as well, and then commercial to the south. So most of it is denser area. And this district of C1AR is described as encourage the orderly clustering of placement of high-density residential and complementary commercial development near the campus business district, which it is. So to review the conditions that we were proposing with this, we propose a max height of 100 feet on C1AR, max parking of 0.25 spaces per dwelling unit, principal use is multifamily residential, and a maximum of 30% of that could be short-term rentals. And then there are no natural gas connections except for emergency backup. comparing to other residential land uses that are in the UDC, we took a look at the heights and also how many allowed units you could do within that. So this tries to illustrate where the conditions lie on C1AR for this project, and how it compares to, what we hear from the community that to have housing. To get to our proposed 216 units, this is the best zoning for that. There's also the LA vacation, just wanted to clarify where that's at on the site plan. In the middle on the north side, this is what we're counting in the FAR calculation of the overall site. And this breaks down what the FAR is, since there's a few things that are added onto it and excluded from it. So the 8,000 square feet of additional premium is from the plaza that we've designed around the building. And then we have a ZBA variance for at-grade parking, at-grade enclosed parking, only at-grade. And so that you can see in blue is how much we're actually using. So we're allowed to be at 311% FAR. And this is proposed at 308% FAR for the project. Existing is 38 dwelling units on this site in 10 non-conforming R4C structures. And you can see as it changes there, fits in with the scale of the neighborhood quite well with more density. And it's also located along four really robust transit lines from the ride, and along with plans for all ages and abilities networks along South State Street and the tree line trail along the railroad in the future. So getting into the site plan, we're working this area. This is a view from what would be the parking lot of Salvation Army. So looking from the south, this is the tallest side of the building along State Street. It's really open and meant to be a good neighbor in that area. And when we get into where it's placed on the site, we can get into more detail on this, but we're using an exception in the zoning to have 5-foot setback on one side, and we meet the 10-foot setbacks everywhere else. No parking is required, but through hearing from the community and knowing there's some parking constraints in this area, we've provided this much parking, so it's necessary to reflect the feedback from the neighbors, and the ZBA approved it just for ground floor and nothing above. 53 spots, all are EV capable. Bike parking is similar to the last time, same amount of spaces. All of the Class A bikes are on the ground floor. We're not counting ones in units. Everything is accessible there. This is the part of the ZBA approval where we had the issue. We wanted to illustrate what's going on underneath the building. The parking we couldn't push the parking below grade because we had the stormwater detention below the parking. And if we push that down into the water table, it would be bringing water up out of the water table and putting it into the city's stormwater system, which is not a best practice. So this is the space where it could be is underneath the building. So you can see also we have geothermal wells. These are the blue dots in here. 62 of them planned that go 400 feet deep, and crane roads that have to also access these areas. Any other questions I can add later? Outdoor space is the same. We have this second level outdoor garden space that's accessible to all. It's publicly accessible from stairways and an elevator on the White Street side.
I just want to note that you have just a little over a minute left in your presentation.
Got it. Thank you. Sustainability-wise, everything is still the same. It's a fully electrified building. We have solar on the roof, green roofs around. We're building it with mass timber as a tall mass timber building, where we've been working with the building department to work out variances to do that. We've been working closely with them, and they've been very helpful. wall insulation is more than double the required amount. STC ratings on windows are higher because of the train that's very close by. And it's also, since it is built with modular construction, we're aiming for a quicker and quieter construction than typical. One comparison and point about the mass timber is how much carbon it sequesters. So this chart here shows that it would, the embodied carbon of the building is already less than 2.2 times what a typical concrete building would be. And then almost a third of that would be sequestered in the actual wood of the building. I have multiple plans of all the levels, the unit plans, and the rest of the supporting documents as well for any other clarification and questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear staff presentation from Alexis DeLeo. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Feel the tables are reversed. I feel that Adam did a very good job on presenting what has changed. I'll just give a very brief recap and maybe hit a point or two that were not covered as well. So this is the Southtown project. It has 3 petitions. There are 3 motions in the staff report. I did change the order of the motions from the previous meeting, but the motions are largely the same. The motion for the rezoning has been updated to reflect the changed conditions that have been offered. There is also the document in the packet for the conditional zoning statement of conditions, which does need a better name. Staff is recommending approval of all 3. As mentioned, I will not go into it. The offer of conditions has changed. I feel it's fairly well articulated, but I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions. As noted, the Zoning Board of Appeals on May 24th granted a variance to exclude the floor area used for at-grade parking from the FAR calculation for the Southtown. If one was to calculate the floor area of this building, it is not changed. But the FAR, which is the floor area ratio, that will use a different base number, and that base number will not include the space, the floor area used for the at-grade parking. So it meets the FAR requirement of the C1A/R district, including the use of the bonus from the premiums that it earned. So it complies with the zoning district for which it has requested. I've also gone through in the staff report what the outstanding comments were and how they were addressed at the previous public hearing and meeting. The transportation staff had not completed their review of the multimodal transportation impact analysis, MTIA. Very high level, that multimodal transportation impact analysis concluded that there are acceptable operations for all modes of travel. It has a few recommendations. It recommended some things for a safety review, including providing a protected bike lane, painting bike boxes, and so forth. It also recommended converting Henry Street between White and South State to 2-way operations, revising the on-street parking on Henry Street to accommodate the proposed uses, sort of specifically the daycare if one is opened, and providing a high visibility crosswalk across Stimson at White. And then to recap our recommendations for approval, staff recommends that the rezoning to C1A/R be approved and the conditions be accepted. And we recommend approval of the street vacation and the site plan. Both meet the standards of approval for those types of projects. I think myself and Adam are probably here to answer any additional questions, but I turn it over to you and the public hearing.
Thank you. So now we'll move to the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed petition. We'll call first on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants To speak during this public hearing remotely, press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of their phone number or by name if available for those accessing the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute any television or background sounds so we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And just as a reminder, as Commissioner Sauvé mentioned earlier, we're having a technical difficulty with Zoom where remote participants, we can hear you in the chamber, but you may not be able to hear other remote participants when they speak. Is there anybody present that would like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
There are no hands raised.
All right, then I will move to read the proposed motion, and there are 3. So the first one, Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Southtown rezoning petition to C1AR Campus Business Residential District and accept the conditions to limit the maximum height to 100 feet, limit the maximum number of parking spaces to 0.25 per dwelling unit, limit the principal use to be multiple family residential, and no more than 30% short-term rentals, and limit natural gas connection to emergency backup power only, subject to executing a statement of conditions. The second motion reads, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council vacate the unimproved platted alley of Block 3 of the Hamilton, Rose, and Sheehan's addition to the city and town of Ann Arbor. And motion 3 reads, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Southtown site plan at 1601 South State Street and development agreement. Is there anybody who would like to move this motion? Moved by Commissioner Weiss, seconded by Commissioner Dish. We are now in discussion. Is there anybody who would like to kick us off? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Thank you. Where do I start? I have some comments, and then I think I have a couple questions. I'll start with my questions. So I noticed, first of all, I'm sorry that I was not here when you guys were here before, but I did listen to the whole meeting, so I think I'm caught up. So you removed the open space condition, but were there actually changes made to the open space on site?
No, there have not.
Okay. I love that staircase off of Henry. It's off of Henry or Stimson. I don't actually
We
know.
have 3. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, Stimson has one, a large one that goes
Yeah.
up through the plaza, and then there's one off White Street and off Henry Street that are all accessible up to the podium.
And it seems like the internal stairwells also are daylit for the most part.
Most of them, yeah. The only ones that are not are in the taller, the 8-story building that's separated because it's in the middle, so we could get as many units around the perimeter as possible. But every other staircase does have windows in it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you know this. That's like, I've said this to other developers too. It's like, that's how you get people to take stairs.
Yeah.
Like if you live on the 2nd or 3rd floor, you don't want to have to
Right.
take an elevator, but stairwells are always often so like they're scary. You don't want to take them. So
Exactly.
having the windows makes a huge difference. I noticed on the site plan, the reference to the well building standard.
Yep.
You're not seeking well certification, correct? You're just using the standard?
Correct, yeah. So
Okay.
we're just using the standard, the guidelines and the standard that also contribute to glazing in each unit, the minimum glazing, and I think the stairwells, putting art
Yeah.
in the stairwells, making the stairwells like nice is part of it, so.
Well, is
That's
insane.
part of the
So
design.
I'm glad that you're like using the standard, but not going so far as to actually get certified, because I think it's just like a really expensive process that
Yeah.
doesn't always seem worth it. But using the standard, I think is awesome. I love this project. I'm very excited about this project. This might be more of a question for staff on process. The transportation recommendations, or maybe this is a question to the petitioner. The recommendations from transportation and the MTIA, do you have thoughts on those? Are they things that you guys are willing to consider?
Yeah.
They don't have to do those things, correct? They're just recommended, like for us to approve the project, you're not saying that, or for your approval is not contingent on doing those? Where do we sit with those?
if I may, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Tune in to the Ordinance Revisions Committee discussion next Tuesday. Our standards of approval and review criteria for transportation impact studies is a little bit outdated, but the gist is in the do no harm sort of model. And so we take the recommendations from the traffic impact study and we say, you'll need to do those recommendations in order to sort of maintain that do no harm. Now, the code language talks about levels of service and so forth, but the gist would be do no harm. And so they have, my understanding is they have agreed with the recommendations of their own traffic impact study. It will be incorporated into the development agreement because those things are off-site or they don't show up well on the site plan. But they kind of do need to do those things in order to meet the standard of the criteria for site plan approval and the standard for reviewing a traffic impact study, maintaining the levels of service, supporting all the codes and policies of the city, which include our transportation plans and policies, and those sorts of standards.
When you say they, it's not the developer. Because like converting Henry Street to two-way, that's a city thing.
Yeah, there are some of those items within their control, and there are some that are not. Now,
Okay.
converting the city, I would imagine, I am using my experience working with the transportation engineers, but I am not a transportation engineer. I would assume that the city would handle all of the proper resolutions and motions and approvals for that traffic control orders, but perhaps they may bear the cost of signage, changing the signs, changing the paint, changing the stripes. A lot of that will be torn up anyway, and so this will go into the civil plans about how to restore the street and where to put which pavement markings, where to restore which signs.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can follow up with.
Sure.
We worked closely with our transportation engineer to come up with these recommendations too, so it wasn't as much of like, you have to do these, but
Okay.
we brought up these ideas and we're very happy to do these, the recommendations that they've come up with for better pedestrian safety and better function, especially for White Street for bikes to turn on it and use it, or Henry Street, I mean. And as you can see on this site plan shown here, how much of this dark area would be the torn up area that Alexis mentioned, including the crosswalk across to the ride. And we talked to people at the ride for what type of crosswalk would be needed so that it doesn't impact the bus stop that's there.
Awesome. So I'm comfortable with the zoning change. I mean, campus business district, I think like that definition has changed significantly. Like everywhere is campus now, it seems like. And I think my more general comment, like there's so many things in this project. You guys have brought us so much of what we basically beg other petitioners for. I mean, I know this when you were flipping through like bird safe glass, like just all kinds of these little details that are so important. But like this project in particular was postponed for over a month. And I think, in part because staff reviews weren't completed before the first time that you were here. And this isn't a comment to you guys at all, but like, I think we've talked about this before, like it would really behoove us as a city to offer some sort of expedited approvals, staff reviews process to projects that are helping us meet like these specific things that we want, like kind of that carrot approach, that hopefully we get other developers to consider similar things until we can require them. Because it's just too bad that this had to be postponed for over a month. So I'm looking forward to voting yes on this project.
Commissioner Dish, were you next in line?
The questions that I was going to ask were precisely about the traffic things, because I did not see how the petitioner could do some of them. But it would be interesting if private developers could change the directions of streets. So I do not think that I have, no, I really don't. And thank you for bringing it back with the answering some of the concerns that emerged.
Any other, Commissioner Mills?
Thank you. I'm excited about this site plan just as much as I was a month ago. in retrospect, and particularly to the comment about postponement, in retrospect, separating the things would have satisfied what we could have done. Like, I think I tried to channel then that I was very happy about the site plan. I want this built, this alley vacation. Similarly, no concerns. It was the rezoning. Not, again, for this project. It's thinking about the long term. And so the conditions, I think, totally, absolutely move in that direction. I'll just, for everybody else to know, well, first of all, I think this wasn't the condition necessarily that I was really focused on the sustainability elements. So I think having, offering the full electrification satisfies that. Just so people know, they're not tied. You guys aren't tied. Nobody in the future is tied to geothermal there, right? And so, so long as everybody knows that, similarly to solar on the roof or mass timber, right? Like nobody is tied to that. And so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. The other elements the other part of the condition that changed about kind of uses, right? This is very much, at least my read of the condition is there's lots of expansive uses that are allowed in C1AR. This is effectively like very much restricting that. And actually, that's my question either to the petitioners or to staff. The condition reads that it would be primarily multifamily residential with allowances up to 30% for short-term rentals. Are there any other non-residential, based on that condition, would there be other non-residential uses that would be allowed?
Well, primarily means 51%.
Okay.
So a good portion of the building could be devoted to non-residential uses. I think what we usually see in mixed-use developments are actually primarily residential. It's usually the first floor, maybe the second floor is used for commercial. And then sometimes you get a few floors of office, and then the upper stories are residential. So if you're going by square foot or by percentage-wise, most buildings are primarily residential. My opinion is that in terms of real true limitations, this building could not be a hotel because that is a commercial use, and a hotel would be probably the primary use. But otherwise, I feel that most development scenario or mixed use scenarios that you can think of would probably still be permitted.
Okay. So, and actually, in your presentation, you had a table that kind of laid out, you know what table I'm talking about, maybe? If you can read my mind.
Yeah.
No, you mean the DUA?
It was early on in the presentation. That one,
No.
right? And thank you. So what I'm hearing is that what this rezoning allows for 216 units. There's multiple ways of doing this, but more or less, like at least half of those have to be multifamily residential, right? Like at least half of that would have to be multifamily. And so at least 108 would need to be rental or multifamily residential. Thank you. The rest of that square footage could be used for other things, but what I'm trying to say is we are going to get some we talk about housing, right? And hotel is not quite housing. And so I think that that's really helpful as a point of comparison, in my mind, at least. And I didn't write down the numbers fast enough. So thank you for coming back to this. I think that that's really, that helps me kind of put that in context. And thanks for defining primarily for us, knowing that I want to make sure actually that there is some flexibility, within this zoning district. I mean, that's one of the benefits of this zoning district. It's not only residential. It allows for mixed use. And so I think that I wanted to make sure that we're not, I like the flexibility of that. Did you have anything else to
Nope.
add? Okay, super. One final question that I have. In your original staff report to us, you said that your recommendation that this is the appropriate district was contingent on two things. And one was and I gotta go back and pull up the staff report. One was associated with what went to ZBA, right? Like, does it actually meet the appropriate FAR for the district? And that ZBA determination moves with the land. The other one was about the 19-foot setback from the back of the curb in all of the areas. And I think my question to you is that because of the site, like, we're seeing that on the site plan that we have, but is there a chance that if that site plan doesn't get built, that stipulation isn't met in the future? Like, are there places where no setback is required on the sides and the rear? And would they run, or is that too close? Would it lead to less than 19 feet?
Thanks. Staff felt that the 19 feet from the back of the curb to building face, which is a different, it's a little bit of an apples to oranges compared to setbacks.
Right.
Was important, was almost a mitigation for the upzoning. We would have recommended approval of the rezoning without any further conditions. We felt that the C1A/R district was appropriate for this location, for this setting, met the goals of the master plan, comprehensive plan, many of the collective goals of the city. But when the site plan proposed, because even if it's zoned C1A/R, the building doesn't necessarily need to be 200 and some thousand square feet.
Right.
But it was, and so therefore, with that density, it should have that downtown level of space to provide whatever pedestrian amenities and non-motorized amenities, multimodal amenities are needed. I think we would reserve judgment and, again, take it on a case-by-case basis. Should this project should it be rezoned, the project not be built? It would depend then on what is proposed. If a less dense project is proposed, maybe we don't need that 19 feet. Maybe whatever space is there would be appropriate for that development. So that's, I think, if I'm answering the question, or if I'm trying to answer.
Yes.
It would be a key feature if the next iteration was exactly this size. But I have confidence in our development review staff and our planning commission and our city council that we would make sure that whatever's proposed is the right thing, just like we got now, if that makes sense. I'm saying I don't feel that I don't feel very, very strongly that we need to safeguard
The 19 feet.
the 19 feet, because I feel it's sort of circumstantial depending on what's proposed, and it's hard to predict the future. So I feel confident in our processes and our site plan review process.
Okay. I appreciate that. It gives me a little bit of discomfort, not going to lie, in part because many times, this was early on in Planning Commission. We've had developer attorneys stand at the podium and say, when it's not a rezoning, when it's the site plan, say you shall approve it. It meets the standards, and so I'm not sure what kind of teeth we have to require more. That face setback. Yeah. Again, I want this. I want everything in here. Yeah. And
I can clarify two things.
Yeah.
That one, the C1A/R district does require a 10-foot setback. Now, you can flex that 10 feet down to 5 feet if there's compensation, if there's increased setbacks or something on a different side. But there are setback requirements.
Okay.
in the C1A/R district. It requires a minimum of 10 feet from the front. There's no side, no rear, but this site has no side, no rear now.
Because the entire thing is front.
Yes, yeah.
That,
And-
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Got it.
so there are some amount, so there's the existing right-of-way, there's the existing sidewalk space now, and there is a required 10-foot setback that can be flexed to 5 feet. And as the planning commission knows, we do incrementally change our standards. I think as the city densifies, we are going to be looking at maybe codifying some of these standards for pedestrian amenity zones and so
Right.
forth. So that's why I would have some concern, but I would not, my recommendation is I would not hold up what is on the table for those future concerns.
Okay. Understood.
And I can clarify too,
Yeah.
how we're using what Alexis described as that 5-foot setback and how we're using the 9 feet. And on this slide here, you can see we have over 19 feet from the building face to the curb. So that 10-foot setback already does push this back pretty far. And then this is where, in this case, this overhang is the only thing encroaching into the 5 feet. So that's how those 10-foot setbacks really does push you beyond the 19 feet already.
Okay, I was going to say, that's helpful. It's
Yeah.
just like, if 19 feet was the thing, like, how close are we? Like, are there places where, because as we have discussed on other streets, like, sometimes the curb to property line is very small.
Right.
Okay, super.
We have
Thank you.
distance here.
And so we don't have that situation here so much. Great, then my only question mark there has been ticked off. I'm super excited. I'm sorry if I did not suggest that last time, but I really am excited for this. I hope this site plan is what gets built on this property. I do think that there's, yeah, so thank you.
Commissioner Clark, did you have comments? Or did I mistake your hand? I think we're discussing all three motions together, yeah.
Okay, so I just had a quick question. I'm just curious, on the green roof, can you just clarify what materials will be used for that and what your general plan for making sure that space is activated is?
Yeah. I mean, there are two levels of this. So there's that second level podium, which, let me find the right slide here. The second level one is the one you're referring to, or the sixth level, the higher one?
Both, but whichever one is
okay.
public is the one I'm more interested in.
Okay. So yeah, this is the view on that second level public one. We have areas of artificial turf, so it's a raised paver system that's across this area. So portions of it are concrete tiles and portions of it are wood, and then portions are actually artificial turf where you can put some flexible furniture out, so it doesn't need any additional irrigation, which wouldn't be appropriate. And then we also have these large areas that are along the side that are planted here to buffer both the residential spaces, and each residential space on the second floor has a little outdoor terrace. So that buffers that space. So when you're in the middle here, you're separated from people that are living there. So there's a little bit of privacy there. Same thing along the north side here as well. That's also planted the same way. It's screening some mechanical equipment, so it's a larger planted area. And then this is a wood deck along here. So a lot of open space to have flexible furniture and amenity spaces that isn't so fixed, and it allows people to really use it the way they would like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Commissioner Lee?
Thank you. Just to recap, I think the rezoning is probably the element that we are kind of honing in on, and just always recapping kind of what are the criteria by which we rezone. It's going to be to establish, maintain sound, stable, desirable development within the territorial limits of the city. And it won't be changed unless it's an error, changes in municipal policy, or changing conditions in the particular area or in the municipality generally. So to me, I think this hits all three. So sound, stable, desirable development, I do believe that it satisfies those three, as well as the changing conditions in the municipality. So I think there's a heightened need for housing. I do appreciate the fact that they address the 30% short-term rentals. Running quick math, still 151 units is pretty much, if you max out STRs at 65, you got 151 units. So it's still a net gain of 113 units over what we have currently. So I think it's good, meaningful placemaking. I think it's very challenging to have a development not feel like it's turned its back on something, right? What's the front, what's the back? I think it does a very good job of kind of really having all dimensions of this feel pretty welcoming. So overall, matches with the sustainability element, improves the built environment, and increases sustainability, especially on a life cycle assessment basis. Meets the intent of the current land plan, even though it's 2009. Yeah, so overall, I'm in support. I think this matches pretty much everything that we have been asking for. The question that I was going to ask is about the MTIA recommendations. I do think that the municipality also need to pull our own weight as far as right-of-way improvements, because transportation planning needs to be in tandem with land use. So if there's anything, I just want to make sure that we are fully committed to making sure that we have right-of-way improvements that match with the land use. So overall, I'm in support. I do believe this meets with the UDC requirements for rezoning. I do believe that this will further our comprehensive plan, matches with the land use element and the sustainability element. So I will be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I just had one quick question about the parking maximum. I'm wondering about parking for non-residential uses, and whether, so currently we don't have a minimum, but there is no parking maximum for many commercial uses. And I'm just wondering about, I don't know, whether that's something that we should be thinking about, or if that's a concern or something that you've discussed.
I mean, we haven't dedicated specific spaces to commercial uses in here, or who can use them.
But the current parking number accounts for one spot for every 4. Is there additional parking in here that's allotted for the ground floor commercial, the daycare, et cetera?
No. So we have drawn on here, so that would allow for 54 spaces, and this is 53 spaces drawn, and there's no room for anything else.
There's no room for anything else. Yeah, I mean, again, this isn't something that in my mind would be rise to the level of holding up this petition by any means, but I think it leaves open the possibility that a different development on this site could be, I don't know, like a TGI Fridays with apartments up above and a big parking lot, right? Because I mean, we don't currently in the city have a parking maximum for restaurants.
Right. But
yeah,
and
that's all.
this goes towards, the only, like, the amount of FAR that you could do and how much you could actually fit on this space. You couldn't do actually more than the 0.25 with the amount of FAR that exists, so. I guess unless
You're saying like just allotted square footage for parking stalls, limited by that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments or discussion? All right, Ms. Kelly, I believe we are ready for a roll call vote.
On the first motion to approve the Southtown rezoning petition to C1AR and accept conditions, Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Councilmember Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yes.
That motion carries. On the second motion to recommend that the mayor and city council vacate the unimproved platted alley in Block 3 of the Hamilton Roads and Sheehan addition to the city and town of Ann Arbor, Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Councilmember Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yes.
And on the third motion to recommend that the mayor and city council approve the Southtown site plan and development agreement, Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Councilmember Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yes.
All three motions carried.
Can I clarify the address? I think you had stated 1601 State Street. South
I'm
State
sorry,
Street.
did I,
Should be 1601 White Street, I believe is what we were using, correct? Did we change it? Okay.
In what aspect? In terms of the naming convention?
up with-
Okay.
I think this could be corrected. I wouldn't stress
Yeah.
too much about it. We can resolve this in between now and city
Thanks.
council.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're going to take a brief 1-minute recess and just allow Commissioner Sauvé time to rejoin us here in the chamber.
This,
Yeah, it was in the last presentation. I didn't intend that we would have to put in all of the but that was my only.
No, I don't.
Okay.
yeah.
I think she, it's fine. I didn't say.
There you go. Thank you.
Not on stream. It's been White Street. We'll figure it out.
We just want to make sure we're good.
Yeah.
That's gonna be hard. You can come up, you can come up here if you want, in case there's any questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Abrams, for chairing. We are back with the next agenda item, which is 2670 to 2690 Ann Arbor Saline Road for City Council approval, a request to rezone these two parcels totaling approximately 1.6 acres from R1C single-family residential zoning to O office district zoning. No new development is proposed, and staff recommendation is approval. First, we will start with petitioner presentation. You have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Munzel. I'm an attorney with Deaver E.B. Issa. My address is 301 North Main Street, Suite 200. Also with me is Andy Reif. He's the owner of the property. Just came from his son's Little League game, so he's, go T-ball. This is Andy's request to rezone 2670 and 2690 from R1C to office. Just a couple of background facts on how we got here. Andy's family's owned these two parcels since about the 1970s. There's two lots, as you can see from the aerial. One has a house on it, which is a small, very small house close to Ann Arbor Saline Road. The second lot has a house and then some storage buildings in the back. These had been used for residential purposes over time. They were rentals, but they became less and less desirable for rentals due to the increased traffic on Ann Arbor Saline Road and just the additional development in that area. And so they became harder and harder to rent. So in about 2019, Andy moved his office into the 2670 small building. He runs a commercial cleaning business. There are normally 2 to 3 employees in that house with 2 or 3 cars during the day. He uses the larger storage building for equipment, supplies, et cetera. He was doing that, and then about 2022, the zoning administrator stopped by and said, hey, this is zoned residential, you can't have an office there. And so Andy was trying to figure out what to do, but one of the solutions would be to rezone the site to office. He does not want to move his office. He wants to keep using that location for his office. He does not plan any changes for the site for the foreseeable future. He just wants to use it for his commercial cleaning business office and use the storage building at the back for just the way he's been doing it without objection from anybody. Again, the important thing for the driver of why we're here is because the zoning administrator said you've got an issue. He doesn't, again, otherwise we wouldn't be here. He doesn't plan any changes. Now, of course, if he's rezoning to office, that has to be something that you would consider. But just so you know, there's nothing contemplated at this time. As far as the various land uses, to the east, you can just see it in the corner is a gas station at the corner of Ann Arbor Saline Road and Eisenhower. That has gotten increasingly more active. It now has a very active convenience store. It now has a liquor license. It now has a burger kind of joint. So that particular location immediately across the street really has an impact on the ability to use the site for single-family residential purposes. Farther to the east, you've got the Whole Foods, REI complex. And then of course to the south, west, you've got Pittsfield Township, and the Target, Myers area out there has just exploded with housing. There's just a tremendous increase of traffic on Ann Arbor Saline Road that has an impact on those 2 sites. I mentioned, just to the south is the I-94 and then Target, et cetera. To the west is multifamily, and immediately to the south of the site is actually the access drive to that multifamily, those multifamily purposes. And then to the north, you've got single-family residential that all enter not on Ann Arbor Saline Road, but to the north. The zoning of the area, to the east, you've got commercial, some PUD. To the south, you've got I-94 and then the township. To the west, it's zoned, I think it's R4C, but it's for multifamily. And then to the north, it is single-family zoned. So the justification for changing to office, there's really 2 reasons. One, there has been a change in conditions so that single-family there is no longer really appropriate. And coupled with that, the sustainability element of the master plan really does meet the goals of that in a way that would justify the rezoning to office. Regarding the changing conditions, the Uniform Development Code 5.29.10.a refers to a change in conditions. I've already outlined how there's been just quite a bit of congestion and activity, particularly into the evening. That gas station is very active, which would have an impact on your ability to have successful single-family residential there. Again, the traffic on Ann Arbor Saline Road and again, I noted the single family to the north does not face on to Ann Arbor Saline Road, nor does it really, part of it does face the Whole Foods, but there's berming, there's a tree buffer along the way. So it really is, in a way, is not impacted by the commercial development to the extent that these two parcels would be. So office use is really designed to be a buffer between intense commercial uses and adjoining residential purposes. So the office designation would make sense. It allows a mix of uses. It could be office, it could be residential or a mixed use. But in the long run, the single-family residential, if it remained that way, would just be underutilized urban land. The sustainability element related to the master plan, as it says, is a new way to think about the master plan and trying to use land use in the context of creating more sustainable development patterns, creating less pollution, creating a better integration of living and workplaces, stronger transit corridors, and encouraging compact development. And the office designation would advance all of these goals. It would either have greater residential density, which could decrease the vehicle miles traveled. Even if it were an office-type use, those uses would be closer to the residential, and it would encourage the potential work-live relationship.
I'm sorry, just about 2.5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. It's on a transit corridor, so there would be the potential of using the bus line. And basically, it is really an office designation would encourage a more compact development pattern that would be a better use of scarce urban land. So the office designation would seem to be compatible with the sustainability element of the master plan. We held a citizens participation meeting. 2 people showed up. The questions really were related to what might happen in the future. Really, if there were to be a change in the future, there would need to be a new site plan. It would have to comply with all the city regulations. It would have to go through the regular process. And so concerns of neighbors would be addressed via the site plan process. And so that's really it. We think that the rezoning to office is appropriate due to the change in conditions affecting the site, and that the office designation would be consistent with the sustainability elements of the master plan. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move to staff presentation.
Okay, thank you. And I think Mr. Munzel did a very nice job of describing what's happening at that site as far as the history. It is 2670 and 2690. The 2670 site is the northernmost site with the existing 630 square foot home there that kind of prompted when it was actually, I think the housing inspector went out there because it previously was registered as a rental, and that's what kind of triggered the domino effect of, hold on, this is an office, not a residential rental any longer. And then it got passed along to the zoning coordinator for enforcement. And the 2690 site is just to the south, and maybe we can, and I think Mr. Munzel did a great job. It's just in the northwest quadrant of I-94 there at Ann Arbor Saline Road. He described all of the surrounding uses. This is a blow-up. The one thing is that it's about a 3,500 square foot storage structure that we could tell was built around the 1980s, mid-80s, I think, from the city permits that were issued. It's an interesting building because it did come in for a variance like in the 1998, I believe, in the staff report, and it went to the ZBA to be used as some type of self-storage, but the trail ended, like it was heard, got tabled, never came back. So it really has been used for self-storage for at least 40 years, I think, as far as I can tell from the archival research. Again, I think Mr. Munzel described the zoning. It is zoned R1C. To the north is all R1C, single-family residential. But to the west is the apartment complex R4A, which is multifamily residential. Across the street, PUD, restaurants, service station, convenience stores. Also C1B, which is community convenience, also kind of a strip mall there. So it has, in also doing a lot of research since probably about 1990, this area really has developed quite a bit, especially in the Pittsfield Township area, if you've ever been over there with the Myers and the residential that's been expanded. A survey, the petitioner did ask for a waiver of a site plan. It was granted by our planning manager since there is nothing being proposed at this site at this time. Although, as was previously mentioned, if there is any changes to this site, it will require a site plan for planning commission at minimum. And that includes whether it's a small addition or parking lot addition, expansion. It'll have to come in. You'll be hearing it again if there's any changes to the site. And we can use this slide for any future reference if you'd like to take a look at what's existing on site. This is the view looking westward from Ann Arbor Saline Road. So this is kind of, if you were looking across the street from the service station that's there. The house in question that's being now used as an office. I'll just put my cursor over it. And then to the south, it's really tough to get pictures over there because it is screened by a lot of landscaping. There is a house, I believe it's vacant, actually. I don't think there was anybody in there when I walked back there, that's behind the trees. And that storage structure is more in the kind of the southwest section of the site. Again, looking northbound as you're coming into the city, that's the service station, drive-through, restaurants, and behind that you'll also see the strip mall in that area, and you can just see the house there to the left. Staff does recommend approval of the rezoning to office from the R1C. The petitioner also brought up elements of the master plan and the sustainability plan. I would also probably emphasize that it does recommend back in 1990, so it's more than 30 years old, that it be zoned R1C, and that came from the South Area Plan that was integrated into the master plan, back in like 2007. So there's a lot of other elements in the master plan, the comprehensive plan, the sustainability plan, that would recommend, that this actually is appropriate for the office use. And staff comments, there weren't a whole lot of comments because there are no changes out there. So if this does come in for development, it may change everything as far as access, traffic counts, et cetera. So at this time, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed site for rezoning. We will first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Seeing no one present, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
There are no hands raised.
All right. So we'll close the public hearing and I'll read the motion. We'll take both together. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve 2670 and 2690 Ann Arbor Saline Road for rezoning from R1C Single Family Residential District to O Office District. And the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby waives the area plan requirement as no new construction is proposed for the site and a survey of the existing improvements on the site has been provided. Moved by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Weich. Discussion of the proposed motion. Commissioner Weich.
Just have a few questions. One, and this is mainly for staff. So the rezoning is going to make the site non-conforming in a number of ways. What should we think of that? I'll start there.
Okay. So there's a couple of questions there. The first one is the office would be into conformance, but the self-storage would not. It's still not allowed in the office district. We as staff met and discussed this and decided since it's been self-storage, or at least for personal storage use for 40 years, that it's a non-conforming use. So whether the issue is it doesn't get rezoned or it does get rezoned, it's a non-conforming use for 40 years. As far as the setbacks, yes, if it does get rezoned to office, there are a couple of side setbacks that are adjacent to residential because that requires a 30-foot setback when it's adjacent to residential. So it would be a couple of sides. I think it's possible the rears are going to meet because it's 30 feet, but the sides may not meet. But again, we would address that when it comes into the site plan stage. I assume because it's allowed 75% FAR, these houses probably would go away. And if the ordinance still stands, we would have conflicting land use buffers and that 30-foot setback.
Okay, so you're saying that because we haven't enforced the rules for 40 years, it doesn't make sense to start now?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think we're going to have a real uphill climb because they've got permits for all of this. At some point, we have issued permits for all of this and done inspections. So I think we would have a very difficult time. I would leave that up to the attorneys if they wanted to get into it, but we've, for the most part, condoned it. So they do have documentation that they pulled building permits and what it's been used for.
Okay. And then in your staff report, or somewhere, it mentioned the citizen participation meeting and that the minutes were attached. Did I not have a link to that?
They should be. If not, you can go.
Because I'm looking at what's in our packet, and they're not
that
linked.
That section is not linked. It is
and
in
then
our
hold on. Then I went into these, and none of these had them.
Click on the survey and report.
Okay.
Because I think it's all attached.
Is it just a
There you go.
photocopy?
Keep scroll. Yep.
Okay.
Scroll all the way
right.
down, and you're going to see the minutes, the survey, and the
Okay.
application all together.
All right. So I didn't.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
It's
I
confusing
missed that.
because it's all we tied them all together.
Okay, so just coming back to the non-conforming structure, the other question I think I had was didn't we make an ordinance revision change that permitted small businesses in residential? And why doesn't this fit? This is not the same?
You may be referring to like a home occupation, so you live there and have your office there.
But because
the applicant
they
does
do not live there, that's
Correct.
the need for it. But if the applicant were to move in, then it could remain R1C.
It could.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be a home occupation.
Okay, and then my other question is, what's the trigger for a site plan? So could the petitioner make changes as long as they didn't change the footprints of what is already on the site?
It would, once he starts, it depends on what they're proposing, because there's certain levels. Is it a site plan for planning manager? That might be something like, less than 10% of the floor area.
Yeah, they keep everything in the same configuration, but now they can go up to 55 feet because it's been rezoned. So that, because of the floor area ratio, that would
You're raising
trigger
the
it.
height, floor area.
All right, I just want to make sure that there weren't.
If the applicant were to come in and, let's say they want to fix their plumbing, they're doing interior renovations, they pull the proper trade permit, that's not going to trigger any type of site plan. But any type of parking lot expansion, increase in floor area, that would then, we'd have to look into, is it a site plan for planning manager, is it a site plan for planning commission? I doubt, the rezoning's got to go to city council for approval, but the site plan probably doesn't, but it all depends on what's being proposed.
Okay. All right. I think those are my questions.
Any further? Commissioner Dish?
I'm really asking this because I feel like I must be misreading something. I'm not raising an issue, but I too became obsessed with the nonconformities. And so I'm looking at the sides, and you have two asterisks for the 2670 building for the 20.7-foot east side, which makes sense because that's supposed to be 30-foot minimum. But the 75-foot west side also has two asterisks, and I can't figure out why that would be.
I was hoping you wouldn't catch that.
Oh,
Commissioner
good.
Dish. That will be corrected before it goes on to city council. If you could see, I highlighted all the little asterisks on there with the setbacks, so it will be corrected. You're correct.
Thank
You're
you.
not seeing things.
Okay, I just was like, okay,
Yep.
do I not, am I reading the wrong
Nope.
column? Okay, good. And then it's just the 2690 then is really quite a bit closer than it should be to a residential.
Yes.
Yes. But 2690 is the personal storage area?
Yes.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any noise, it doesn't have parties. Yeah.
Been there for 40 years, and I don't believe we had any complaints on that. So,
Commissioner Lee?
But in theory, if it is zoned office, not saying that this is going to occur, but in theory, a hotel or a short-term rental is a permitted use within the office district. So in theory, if you wanted to convert the current existing storage into a short-term rental, that would then be a permitted use? I'm just asking the question.
yes, and if so, but just remember, it's still going to have to meet building and housing codes. They would have to come in then and register it, and it's going to probably have to have upgrades to it because it's an office use right now. So I don't know what the housing and building codes are, but it would have to come in for review and approval. And as a condition, if this does get approval, they're going to need a new certificate of occupancy. So they're still going to go in and look at this to make sure that it's certified.
Gotcha. I'm just trying to look at, again, all possibilities. I mean, contextually speaking, I think petitioner did a great job of, we just talked about the conditions and criteria by which rezoning makes sense. Just trying to think about what are all the possibilities that, that could happen. And so the hotel permitted use was just one that, contextually to me on this particular intersection, I think about cleaning company. One of the questions I had was just a type of products that you might use that may have an adverse impact. That being said, there's a gas station across the street, right? So, I mean, again, but that being said, the gas station still has, reasonable proximity. A lot of the water tables are generally going from north to south, west to east. So, when I kind of take a look at this, and I obviously need to look at where the actual detention from the site is, really kind of going. But can I ask you just intensity of kind of products being used? Just
Almost all of our products are drop shipped directly to the site.
Okay.
I'm not gonna say we don't have some products on site, but
Yeah.
none of them go in the drains. They're there
Yeah.
to be stored.
Stored, yep.
Taken to a site.
Yeah, gotcha, yep.
there's-
Yeah.
Besides us maybe cleaning a little bit ourselves, but
Right.
it's minimal.
But mostly the current primary use is just like administrative dispatch and something
Yeah,
along
absolutely.
those lines.
That's why I was there at the office. I thought we complied with the home base because we don't have 12 visitors a day and all the,
Sure,
whatever
yeah.
the things are. That's why we're kind of taken aback. We didn't understand this. Obviously, we were incorrect. I should have hired somebody like that
Yeah.
to begin with. But we didn't know that we had to live there to do it. So, but yeah,
Got it.
there's no chemicals or anything else used. And like I said, the traffic is very low.
Yeah.
Some days it's just me.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Again, contextually speaking, it's an intersection of a highway, so I tend to agree with staff's assessment. Now, the challenge for me is that the master plan or the comprehensive plan's land use element does specify this as a single family detached, but again, the changing conditions is really what the petitioner is citing at. So, and then now, again, the challenge is there's a new comp plan underway, but that's like 18 months. I mean, you have an active business. So again, contextually it makes sense. I'm not, again, so to me, the most kind of concerning element would be the wide array of permitted uses that this could be converted to in the event that this passes. That being said, contextually, this makes sense to me. So that's kind of where I stand. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
Commissioner Mills?
When I originally saw this on the agenda for tonight, and before I looked at it, I was like, moving from a residential district to an office district sounds like an interesting move. I think I understand why. And as the petitioner noted, and I pulled up the use table, right? Single family is allowed here, as is all of the other kinds of residential uses. So I don't think it's necessarily moving us away from residential uses. One, that's something that I had to internalize myself. I think that I understand, I appreciate staff's recommendation here. And, I mean, if, I don't know what the comprehensive plan would turn up. And actually, whether it's going to go through that level of specificity. I don't know what, like, how much detail it's going to get in here. Just looking at it, I mean, I was surprised, honestly, that it wasn't a commercial classification, but then I also understand, like, the conversation that would need to happen in that area. Just given its location, it speaks to, like, intensification of use makes a lot of sense. And thinking about, you know, that is a major corridor in the city. And so higher and better uses for this property makes a whole lot of sense. I think actually under an O classification, there's not as much of a risk of like very quick redevelopment. I think that maybe if it were something else that there might be quicker development, and that's not the intention here. So in some ways that gives me more comfort in thinking that through. This is like a temporary use and not hindering if someone does want to live there. That development, and actually having duplexes, like this became duplexes, that's totally possible too. So all that is long rambling way of saying I'm also in support of this. I think it makes sense for all of the reasons that Commissioner Lee said as well.
Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. One of the interesting things I thought was, you know, I don't want necessarily just, when you look at the land, it's commercial, it's red on the map, and so it's like you just have this one little blip of red kind of on the corner. So it's like a part of me is like, does that stretch need to be, you know, kind of up zone to office or something that allows more? Does this fit in TC1? I'm just literally spitballing. Does it look like TC1? I don't know. I'm just throwing those ideas out there. As of right now, actionably to me, I mean, it does make sense simply because right across the street, it is commercial. The extension thereof still contextually makes sense. So I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Mills' comment that, yeah, residential still can be used. And the protections are still in place in the event that this turns into, petitioner tries to turn this into a short-term rental or a hotel use, that it would have to still go through the proper permitting process, inspections, et cetera. So by those virtues, the thing that I would actually say is like, hey, well, should we take a look at the rest of the corridor almost? But that's a different conversation altogether. But overall, to me, conceptually makes sense. Thanks.
Any further comments? Maybe I'll just add, and maybe this is experience with other projects, maybe playing the worst case scenario or alternative scenario. I don't think it's the worst case scenario. That shed could turn into a banquet hall, which we just kind of went through, the ordinance changes for internally. And that may not require a site plan review. But because it could increase the intensity of use, what typically triggers that is a parking count. And we don't have parking counts anymore. But I do think that staff has discretion to measure the intensity of use of non-conforming buildings when they change a use. And so if there was a condition where the petitioner came back, tried to pull a building permit for a banquet hall in that shed, and it still has to go through zoning compliance review, that higher intensity use within a non-conforming structure would probably trigger staff to say you cannot be more non-conforming. And even though it's an existing physical non-conforming thing, the use would be more non-conforming relative to its intensity. So that's kind of the scenario that I play out, and what I've understood and experienced with staff kind of measuring the evaluation of the process that it might go through. And so I trust and understand that staff would also realize this and request that it go for either planning manager review or to planning commission to understand that kind of higher intensity change of use. So it was asked kind of what kind of scenarios might we look at, and that's kind of one I would understand, but I don't have concerns about relative to different ways sites are evaluated during the permitting process. Commissioner Abrams.
Just to underline that, I think it's actually not even discretionary. In the UDC 5.32.1, non-conforming use says that it shall not be expanded or increased in intensity of use. So it's written there very clearly. So I don't think any of us should hold on to any worry about that.
Further discussion? All right, I'll ask staff to take a roll call vote.
On the first motion to recommend to Mayor and City Council to approve 2670 and 2690 Ann Arbor Saline Road rezoning from R1C to O Office District, Commissioner Salve,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Councilmember Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yes.
That motion carries. On the second motion to waive the area plan requirement as no new construction is proposed for this site and a survey of existing improvements on site has been provided. Commissioner Salve,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Councilmember Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yes.
That motion also carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. At this time, we move to public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any issue as the public on any agenda item or not. We will first call on individuals present to address the commission and then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press star 9 if listening by phone or use the raised hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers as they have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone, seeing no one in the chambers looking to speak, is there anyone who would like to address the commission remotely? Ms. Kelly.
There are no hands raised.
All right. At this time, I'll close the public hearing and move on to commission proposed business. Is there any commission proposed business? Commissioner Weich.
So I just wanted to draw our attention to the memo that we received from Planning Manager Mr. Leonard. And I wondered how we could facilitate a conversation, whether it's at the table or in another space. I think we might have a retreat being planned at some point, so it might be a topic for that agenda as opposed to tonight. But more conversation here, so and just to give people some thinking points, at least from my mind, is we might reduce, ask City Council to reduce our size from 9 to 7 and then use the reduction to create 2 alternates. So the composition, like the folks who are appointed would stay, but it would just change the composition because it doesn't appear that there would be a way to do the alternates. And with so many of you being active in the development community in one way or another, recusals are happening a lot. And I think I've been on for 2 years, and I feel like in the last 6 months, we've had more recusals than we had in the previous 18 months. And so how do we address that? Because that does I think it creates some amount of harm to petitioners because they come expecting a full committee to hear, and then there isn't. And so then that puts pressure on you to be here or to figure all of this out. So how do we sort of address that? Because we want your expertise at the table, but then your expertise often creates conflicts. And so then you have to leave the table, and then we have to send denials, technical denials to city council. So I would just love to figure out, like, do we have that conversation at the table during a conversation like this? Is this something that we propose for a retreat conversation? Do we ask our city council person to advocate? Like, how do we go forward?
So can I just ask, would this be something, we're talking about city transportation with the UDC or the ORC meeting, would this be something that could roll into that agenda first, or maybe staff or commission proposed business to add to the executive committee's next meeting planning the retreat?
I think there are a lot of appropriate avenues that this could be brought up. My recommendation would be to discuss in a forum where all of the planning commission is present, because in order to kind of request via a resolution or a memo or any other type of communication to council to make a change, you'll want to make sure that that request reflects the majority of this body. So you could put it on an agenda for a working session, try to reach a consensus, and then at a regular session, if there is a consensus reached, vote to move forward some type of communication to city council, because of course it is it is not within the UDC or the purview of the planning commission to workshop the exact changes, although you could make some suggestions for what you would like after you come to agreement.
Okay. So I'll just.
I see Councilmember Dishes.
Do you want to add to?
No, I just wanted to ask. So, so what you've suggested, or what Commissioner Weich has suggested, sounds complicated, whereas there is a suggestion on this page that we reduce. We could reduce our standard for enacting a land use decision to the majority of the members present, which seems easier.
So I will just say to Planning Manager Kelly's point, like, this is a time for commission proposed business to make this a business item for a future rather than workshopping details at this time.
Right.
And so we can just request.
Yep. Could I request a briefing, though, from staff on, like, what would be the implications?
Yeah.
And doing this alternative.
Yep.
I would like to hear from them the pros and cons of the alternative thing here.
We can certainly find a time in an upcoming working session to discuss and consider what changes might accommodate the modifications that would allow for a vote. However, I don't think that lowering the number of votes required for approval would necessarily bring more voices to the table, so it doesn't make up for the recusals. And yes, we can discuss this further, but I think that it is perhaps worth considering with nuance.
Yep. Thank you.
I don't want this to bump anything that's on the work plan. I just didn't want this to be the final word.
Yep.
So that was what I was really saying. So if we're trying to find where we put this, we put it onto the work plan and then we move it up. Because if we get something done and it's like, look, we have a meeting that we don't have anything scheduled for, this is the thing we talk about at that meeting, as opposed to not having that meeting. And then it sort of gets discussed and goes away. But I'm not suggesting that we bump our work plan to do this. I just recognize that we're already down a commissioner, and with some of what's coming, there's the potential for there to be more recusals. And so then that's going to impact petitioners. And I just don't know what the horizon of that looks like. So that's why I want to raise it during this period.
Appreciate that. And I think relative to our work plan, what we've seen is things that are easier for staff to prepare, like memos already, we may see come ahead of other things that are actually on our work plan because of gaps in our scheduling time. Any other commission proposed business at this time? No? With that, we'll move on to adjournment. Do we have someone to move? Commissioner White, and seconded by Commissioner Mills. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. And we are adjourned.